Hello and welcome to the Young Film Academy podcast, the essential podcast for teenagers looking to find their way into the creative industries. I'm Dan Allen. I'm joined by Ellen Thomas. How's it going, Ellen?
Hello, Dan. Yeah, going well. We're
good.
In the midst of a heat wave.
It is hot.
At the time of recording.
Yeah. Though that sort of record temperature in the UK is happening right now as we record.
Yeah.
Ellen's had to close her window. She's had to turn off her fan just for the sound purposes.
Dan forced me to.
I don't want to say you look like a mess, Ellen, but I'm joking. No, you couldn't tell.
But that actually brings us on really nicely, the window shutting and the fan turning off, because I showed a commitment to sound.
And I know someone that shows an even bigger commitment to sound, Ellen.
Yes. Joining us today, we have Manav Kher from Twickenham Film Studios. He is a re-recording mixer who actually started out as a sound runner at Twickenham Film Studios and has developed into lots of roles there, being a mix tech and a sound editor as well. He's worked on some amazing films like Gladiator 2, Top Gun, Mission Impossible, and also the Enola Holmes series. So we're very excited to talk to him all about post-production sound and what it's like working at Twickenham Film Studios.
Amazing. So without any further ado, welcome to the podcast, Manav. How's it going? Hello. Welcome to the podcast, Manav. How's it going?
It's great. Thank you so much for having me on.
We're
really looking forward to this.
Yeah, super excited to have you on, dude. And I mean, sound is such a, we've spoken about, on the podcast before, such an important part of the process, and it really is, 50% of the experience. And if anything, if you take it away, it almost feels like a bigger loss than 50%. But I wondered if you could sort of break down. I know you've worked in a variety of different roles on different films, from sort of re-recording mixer and Foley as well, and in other supporting roles within sound. Could you sort of break down what sort of the structure of the sound team is, and what each different role does?
Of course. So usually, I think, and this is specifically going for post sound, on set, obviously you've got your production mixers and boom ops and assistant sound. But talking about, post-production audio, where it's usually run, the person at the head of it always a supervising sound editor. And their role is effective, or they can sometimes also be called a sound designer, depending on what they want. But as sound supervising sound editor, designer, whatever you want to call it, they run the show effectively, and they are the ones that are kind of in touch with the director the most, from, depending on the production, could be from quite an early stage. And they'll kind of come up with, conceptually, like, okay, how does the world of this movie or TV show sound? And they'll come up with ideas, and they'll manage a team of sound editors across dialogue, sound effects, and Foley as well. So they'll come up with the main sort of ideas, and the sound editors will track lay based on what these ideas are, and put effectively a film together, and usually it's in reels. And then this will then go to the mixers, after the Foley's been shot, after all the dialogue's been cleaned up. The dialogue editor's also in charge of crowd recording. So any like loop group and background crowd, there's, we have sessions where they'll go and record a bunch of people who are paid crowd actors whose sole job is to just be a background voice in the film. And so they can do like a few days worth of sessions where they're just recording a few voices, any sound recordings that they want to do for specific sound effects. Like I know for certain, like for F1, I know they went to the actual racetracks and recorded quite a lot there to really get the real stuff. So all that will come together on a final mix stage, which is effectively a big cinema with a mixing console in the middle, and that's where the mix side of it comes in, where all the stuff that's been done by the sound editors will come together, and the score that's been provided by the composer and a music editor usually will also be, and that all kind of comes together in one room, and you balance it and with the directors, and you really pay attention to things like story and how they want the arc of the film to go, and how sometimes where a director will say, actually, I prefer this scene to sound a little bit more emotional, so you kind of pull back on the real stuff, all the backgrounds and effects, and you sort of push the music for a bit more emotion. And so so that's kind of, in a nutshell, very rough nutshell, what sort of the sound process is.
Amazing.
And when you have the role re-recording mixer, what exactly is the re-recording part?
So the reason it's called re-recording is because all the sound's already been recorded, and when it's being placed together and made into a final mix, you're literally re-recording that into a final mix file. So that's kind of it. We have on the desk, you're able to punch in and record the film onto a separate recorder computer, a separate recorder rig, and so you just when the director says, "Can you update this in the mix?" You'll update the stuff on your mix session, and then you'll hit record, and then it will literally record into another rig, and it's all routed via a mixing console. So it's a big balance of technical and creative.
Yeah. I think with the supervising sound editor, is that, how much of a collaboration is that with them and the re-recording mixer in terms of sort of the identity of the film, would you say?
I think it honestly depends on job to job, but usually that's quite an involved process. Like a lot of supervisors tend to mix as well. That's something that's changing in the industry now as well. You'd see a lot of supervising sound editors wanting to mix as well, because they just stay with the director. So it's quite an important process, because ultimately the supervisors and the mixers are there in the room with the director, and so that the mixers need to kind of be involved in how the story is shaped, and if they're provided a session without really knowing the context of what the film is and what the story arcs are, then you can just go in a completely different direction with it. That's kind of against what's been discussed previously. So it's super important for mixers and supervisors to be with.
No, amazing.
Be in touch with each other.
And that sort of process from the supervising sound mixer, when they sort of start thinking about how they want the film to sound, what does that process look like? Is that sort of R&D? Is that sort of trying to find similar films, or is it sort of just looking at the script and sort of imagining sort of the sound in their heads and then sort of communicating that idea to the director generally? I
think it's a mixture, really. That people have supervisors and directors will have spotting sessions where there'll be a rough cut of the film, or kind of what's been shot so far that they can just watch through and discuss ideas, depending on the size of the project. A lot of the time, if it's something that's a little bit more indie, then there'll only really be one. It depends on the budget, really. But usually, the best thing to do, and a lot of the best supervisors do this, they'll, as early as possible, they'll start having these sessions with the director where they'll just watch through stuff on a rough cut and just say, how do you want this scene to sound? Oh, what should we do for this sound? And really kind of, and as the more detailed those conversations are, the better. The last thing you want is to assume and it's always really about what the director wants, and you'll kind of be as creative as you can with the tools and the ideas that you've been provided, but ultimately it's the director's movie.
And when you're sitting down with a director going through those rough cuts, what kind of like knowledge base are you pulling from? Like what tools do you kind of have in your locker to think like, what sound can we give this scene?
That's a good question. I personally, because I don't supervise, but whenever I've been in, I can only really speak from a mix point of view.
Yeah.
whenever I've been in the room and a director's said, "Oh, I need this to sound a little bit more gritty," and it's usually tweaks like that I'm usually making.
Yeah.
So whenever they ask questions like that, you've got technical tools that you use, things like EQ and reverb and things, and that you can add to existing sounds. A lot of the time, it's replacing sounds that are already on the timeline with other stuff. So sound editors will have libraries of stuff that they can go to and think, okay, maybe we can add a bit of this and add a bit of that, and come up with something and bring that into the mix, and then we'll hit play and the director will go, no, not really, and then you go back and do it again, and then eventually you'll work something out. As you go through the days as well, the more you hear something, the more it will be the more different it sounds almost. So you have situations where you will hit play on something one day and it will sound great, but then the next day you'll be like, actually we could probably change quite a lot in this. So
it's funny because like as a watcher and a listener, you're not necessarily alert to all those different layers of sound. It's just seamless for you. But like, I wonder if you could break down like if there is like as a mixer, what those kind of layers of sound could be and what they could. Is there like there'll be a background bit, and then there'll be like a music bit, and then there'll be like I don't even know, like you said the gritty thing, like a sound that makes that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, there's, again, it depends on the budget and the size of the thing. I think for something like, we worked on this film Turbulence, which is like a sort of action movie, action sort of thriller. That's all in a hot air balloon. And it's the whole concept, and sound was such an important thing for that, because there were loads of moments where, Max, who was a supervising sound editor, his discussions with the director were, well, when you're up there in a hot air balloon, you're not really, you're not actually hearing much because of like the physics of it, and you're not actually hearing loads of wind, and the only thing you're probably really hearing is the sound of the balloon and everything, but. It was balancing. So we had all these layers of the balloon, of the basket creaking, of wind, of kind of like, very subtle ambiences. And you had loads and loads of layers. But it was about actually, in the end, it was more about stripping back and really going with sort of, okay, right, we've had quite a lot of balloon here. Let's just pull it back now. Let's get a little bit more basket in. And then all of that, balance with, is it distracting from the dialogue? Because ultimately, that's the dialogue is plot. That's that's what people want to. That's what people will be paying most attention to.
Yeah.
Unless it's a Christopher Nolan movie, in which case, pump those background sounds. Up to
I
the
gave
max.
up on dialogue 10 minutes in.
Yeah.
Amazing.
I remember.
No, but I mean, even with those films, like I think there's an intention behind it.
Yes.
There's a real intention behind why that's like that, and I think that sums up kind of this process so well, because it's all about style and intention, and if you're going for something, then you a certain way of doing things, a certain set of rules that you set for a film, then go for it. Then that's it.
Yeah, I've definitely seen some really what I consider quite bold and exciting mixes. And what jumps to mind is sort of there's that great club scene in The Social Network. I don't know if you've seen it, but where they just so successfully make the music so loud to the point where like it's drowning out the actors, but you can still hear them razor sharply, even though they're competing. And normally what I'd seen before up until that point in movies was the club music would be like give the impression that it was thumping, but really it was just sort of like much lower in the mix in a way that was maybe inauthentic to the experience of either the characters or the location in a way. Are there any?
They did a great.
Sorry, you go. Yeah.
No, sorry. I was going to say there's a great video on the Social Network about the club scenes. Like they did so much with the music. Like they were recording, they played it through a bunch of speakers and like distorted different frequencies to really like give you that feeling of you're in, in a club, but it didn't, but it's not super loud, like you said, it's just really kind of all around you. And with the actors performing it in a certain way where they're like, it's as if they're yelling over music.
Yeah.
That helps so much with that.
Yeah. I guess you can't do that whole boosting the background sound and making it feel like it's wrapping around them if your actors are just sort of talking at a normal volume and stuff. It's sort of like a dance in a way, because then it wouldn't make sense that we can hear them.
Exactly.
Yeah. Are there any sort of other big moments in sort of films that you've sort of like, I don't know, when you heard them or experienced them, you were like, oh wow, that's sort of cool or clever?
Yeah, I think Arrival was a massive one for me. That I think that was like, that's one of those films where when it came out I was still at uni, and when I watched it I was like, oh my god, I want to get into sound, because it's just like how everything was just so subtle, and like it was really just kind of, you didn't feel like this was designed. Everything felt really natural, especially with all the alien design. And when they go up into the ship and the backgrounds would kind of just be really eerie sounding and hollow, but it didn't feel like this had gone through a synth. It very much felt like very, very real. I think that was a massive one for me. And then like more recently, Dune has been great as well. Like I think that's just like, of course, seminal sound films, both of them, and I guess a third one as well. But yeah, again, all the attention to detail of just like very specific sounds, and that's going back to kind of what you spend your time on as a supervisor. You kind of discuss those very specific things, like a director would very much have like, I want to hear a lot of this, so a supervisor then knows I need to spend most of my time paying attention to this sound. And that's what, because that will be what people will hear, what people will pay attention to. And then because then you'd allocate time, like, okay, 70% of my time is going towards the stuff that people will hear, and then 30% will go towards sort of background stuff that's still really important, but it takes less of a priority than the stuff that's really featured, that we go a bit bolder with in the mix. And then that conversation will be had with the mixer to go, okay, right, this is the stuff that people want to hear. We can go bold with this, these sound effects, but maybe pull this back. And
no, because I was thinking, I mean, some of the ones you obviously identified are all sort of like sci-fi films as well, where it almost feels like there's greater possibility in those films, or there's more unknown quantities in a way. It's sort of like, what does a spaceship sound like, or like what does that thumping thing in Dune sound like? Do you have a sense of like how does one go about discovering those sort of sounds, those sounds that don't exist? I mean, I always think of like the lightsabers as being one of the most iconic sounds in cinema. And, that could have had no sound, that could have just had no sound and no weight to it in a way. And then it just wouldn't be this iconic thing. I think we think of the sound along with the visual. That was excellent, Ellen. That was a really good lightsaber impression. Actually, it was slightly more laser gun. But no.
It was a shy lightsaber.
A shy lightsaber. What would be a confident lightsaber?
Zoom.
Very good.
Not bad.
Dan, I think you should do one.
Yeah. Okay. As long as Manav does one as well.
I'm good.
Okay, mine is a.
Yeah, you've got like the rumbliness of it there.
Duke's looking at me being like, that is terrible. I've got one here. See this? Does this do sound?
That's crazy. Whoa, nice.
There we go.
There you go.
We have the real thing.
The real deal.
Awesome.
Although this is
Look
like
at
a cheap
We don't have a
fantasy.
production soundboard. We have like a real life lightsaber just on Dan's desk.
Hanging about.
Yeah.
But go back to Dan's very interesting question that he asked you about discovering sounds that don't exist.
I think that conversation is, I mean, again, it's so dependent on the director, and who you're working with, because there are people that are like, I have no idea, you go for it. There'll be people that say that you just kind of go crazy. But then there's other people that are like, I want to invoke a very specific feeling, and that's the ultimate thing. It's a lot of it is about emotion. A lot of it is like, do you want people to be scared of this sound? Do you want it kind of to be really pleasing to the ear and things like that? So a lot of it relies on emotion. Like, how do you want to feel when you see a big spaceship? Like, is it intimidating, or is it like a little UFO that's just going across? And then when you're in the mix, it becomes about really accenting that feeling, because you are in a big room when you're watching a film in a cinema. So there's a lot of fine tuning that you need to do to get something to really have the impact that you want it to. So yeah, that's a massive part of it. And I think stuff that does exist, even like going back to that hot air balloon film, adding loads of like random synthetic sounding whooshes as like the balloon would kind of go past and things like that.
Yeah,
it really just helps amp that stuff up. It helps you feel it rather than you're just hearing it. Because a balloon going past a screen, you'd kind of just hear maybe a bit of the balloon flapping and maybe a bit of the burner, but actually there's a huge sequence where there's a massive thunderstorm, and the balloon's like having to dodge all these mountains in the Alps, and there's this great shot of it kind of going past the screen, and it just added like loads of low end and loads of just like loads of like sub, just to kind of really feel that kind of pressure almost. And so it's all about making the audience feel a certain way.
And there's that sense of like audiences don't actually know what stuff sounds like. So like convincing them, or just like giving them a sound that makes them think they're there, but it's probably not actually what it sounds like at all.
Yeah.
And yeah, interesting way of speaking about kind of different genres and sound. And because obviously you've worked on some action stuff, some really cool action stuff. We were talking before we started about the film Seven Dogs, which is a huge action film, but also you've done like some drama as well. So how do you kind of go into those different modes of maybe like really over the top sound design or like mixing, and then more subtle for like drama? Yeah.
And, can I add to that question as well, which is like, because I've always wondered, like with drama, is there then this urge to three-dimensionalize the sound of drama in a way, like you're talking about like the low end of like the the balloon and stuff, but there's not necessarily as many obvious opportunities with drama to create a rich tapestry across sort of high, medium and low frequencies. Sorry, just as you talk about that.
No, that's a great question. I think with going across genres especially is, again, it's all about just like having those conversations beforehand and just being as aware as possible of what the intention of the story is. I think that's key to making sure anything sounds good. It's just like being on the same page as the filmmakers is the most important thing. But specifically going on to drama, I think sometimes it's hard. It's more. I find dramas more challenging personally because you have sound on a timeline. The sound editors have cut these amazing things together, and they're giving you the session, and they go, okay, you go for it. You balance it against the dialogue and everything, and because the sound is there doesn't mean it necessarily needs to be heard. It doesn't mean it necessarily needs to be given. The audiences need to give it that attention. It was like what I was saying earlier. Dialogue is key. That's always the most important thing in a film, because that's the story effectively, especially in a drama. But that being said, if you took all the backgrounds out and you took all of the Foley out, it would feel really weird listening to just the center channel of a cinema and there's nothing around you. So it's about it's about kind of it's a lot more about subtlety and making sure those sounds are there, but just kind of bubbling away. And it's just, getting to the point where you can, if it's, say, for example, if it's a scene in like a busy train station, you still want to know that you're in a train station, but you want to be able to pay attention to the conversation that the two people are having on screen. So it's just keeping things subtle and keeping things kind of evenly balanced, just so nothing kind of pokes out too much and nothing distracts an audience, so you're sitting in the middle of the room and there's this massive like train stopping in the surround speakers, but the idea of the story is that you want to follow the conversation of two people on screen. Suddenly the audience will just turn around and go, what was that? And you don't want them to be doing that. So really it's just about keeping things not super quiet but subtle.
Yeah, balancing, like creating that realism and then also focusing on where the emotion is.
Yeah, totally. Comedy is a fun one for that.
Yeah.
We worked on this film Mother's Pride, and it's just English comedy film that came out a few months ago. It was just being able to tell jokes through sound is really interesting. It's just like, you'd add like random little sound effects to help sell certain jokes, and like there's this one scene where these guys are driving like a really broken car, kind of like my car that I was telling you about earlier. But they're driving like this kind of rundown car that needs a bit of a jump start, and we just added this layer of the car just like really squealing like every time they'd kind of do a slight turn and everything. And it was just it was subtle, but then you'd start to kind of catch on to it, and it actually made the scene helps make the scene a little bit funnier in that regard. So that it's fast. It is really interesting.
Yeah, and I guess with comedy, there's also that timing element as well of like maybe there's a joke where something breaks or something, and then you have to wait, and then the sound comes, and that will like give it more of a comedic impact.
Yeah, and especially like when stuff goes off screen as well. That's great. I mean, ADR is a big part of that kind of process. In general, when we get actors in to sort of overdub lines that maybe didn't sound so great on set, or record different performances that the director said, okay, maybe when the dialogue editor and the director will kind of get together and do a chart of ADR to say this needs a technical ADR, this is performance ADR, and that stuff always is really, really funny, because you don't really an audio post get to see actors and directors interacting in the same way that you do on set. So that's sort of the glimpse that you get of it. And seeing that relationship is really interesting as well. And you really get to find out the intention of the characters a little bit more.
And is the ADR, the additionally recorded dialogue, is that your like remit? Is that how are you involved in that process?
I've recorded quite a lot of ADR at Twickenham. I think, it's been booked in. So over the last few years, and we get opportunities to do that, and it's great. I mean, it's great fun. It's a lot of pressure, because especially as an engineer, because you're wanting to make sure everything sounds right without screwing anything up, or and the director's like, okay, we've recorded a take, now can you fit it in place and play it back, and let's see if it goes. So that you have to do things quite quickly, especially when the actor and the director are there, it's like, okay, right, quick, just very, very fast, but also making sure you get things right. But that stuff's always great. ADR, it's a great process, and especially crowd ADR. That's always great fun because it's a bit more relaxed, and usually it's just a dialogue editor that runs the session with a crowd wrangler who has a diary of people that she can contact and it's a mixture of languages, accents, and ages. So you'll say to this scene, you say to a crowd wrangler, we've got a few scenes where we're in Northumberland and it's a village and it's all full of like old people, and like she'll know, the crowd wrangler, they'll know who to contact for that. They're like, okay, I've got a group of 60-year-old men who can do the Northumberland accent, and so we'll bring them in and we'll put two mics in the middle of the room, and they'll kind of just record various background like call outs, and it really just helps sell the narrative of where you are. Like,
that's amazing. Crowd wrangler is like the best film job title I've ever heard.
Do you
Like,
record them individually, or do you like get like 10 people in front of the mic at once?
Yeah, I mean, we do record them all together. There was a point during COVID, which was hilarious, where because of social distancing, our room, our sort of sound theatre one at Twickenham was one of the few rooms that was big enough to do this, where we had to keep people 2 meters apart, and we got like 6 mics, and they all had individual mics kind of pointing at them,
Yeah.
and they were all like in these yellow and black boxes, all spaced 2 meters apart, and it was hilarious. Yeah, it was great fun.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I'll be honest, I think with Crown stuff, I assumed a lot of it was archive stuff, but I guess it's so important if you, as you're saying, if you are trying to place it in a particular location or area, that you can't really do that. You have to be bespoke and specific with those sort of crowd sounds to bring it to life in a way.
yeah, and it is something that would really take you out of it. Like if it was a party scene in like Brazil or something, and you heard like an English accent, or like it, or just like or vice
this dinner is
versa.
fantastic. Just like in the background, You're like, is that just a general restaurant ambience? That they've just,
That was actually a really great impression of a crowd actor. So please, like,
Thank you.
if you're looking to do it, then do it.
If you need me, just give me the call. I can't do any other accents, sadly, but yeah, I'll do RP. Or
nice.
Essex.
That goes a long way. I think the scenes where, because we had a very specific, going back to that Turbulence movie, it was a very specific location because it was in the Swiss Alps, and finding Swiss German speaking crowd actors was like really tricky. So but and the director was like very specific about that. That's where we need to be.
Yeah.
We can't, and that rightfully so. So here, the majority of the notes that we got were, because we had a mixture of archive crowd and loop group that we'd recorded. The loop group is like another term for it. So we had stuff that we'd recorded and archival stuff. So it was, a lot of my job was just to pull back on my effects crowd, archive stuff, and to really, any Swiss German that we had, just really make sure that was like, not front and center, but that was a thing that was heard if you were hearing any crowd. Just to, again, it's just all about selling the narrative, isn't it? It's all about putting you in a location, and I guess really interesting with sci-fi stuff, because it's you're on a different planet, and you're inventing languages and things.
You definitely need bespoke crowd ambience for that, don't you?
Yeah, I feel like Dan's holding back an alien impression right now.
How did you know? I'm not going to do it though. I'm not going to do it. It will be with in Star Wars. Apparently, like they didn't even invent the languages like they do in like Lord of the Rings. They just asked the actors to just make noises and make sure it doesn't sound like English. Was all they told them. And then there's these the Star Wars fans are sort of really going in depth, trying to break down how these language structures work, even though there's zero thought that went into them. Very
it's
often,
pretty much gibberish.
It's
hilarious. It's great though. I mean, like when you're doing that stuff, it is very much like you do have to acknowledge the fact that this is a background sound.
Yeah,
you're not gonna like.
You're not the star of the scene.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's just really funny that audiences have been trying to break down all that stuff over the years, and it's just like, just like speak whatever you like. Yeah, it's fine. We'll make it work. Yeah.
How many? What are the different layers that go into background? Because I've heard about, like, obviously room tone is a thing. Is that how prevalent is room tone? Obviously, you mentioned crowd as well. What are sort of the different layers to background?
It depends on who the sound editor is who's providing you with the session. There are some people that really just go all in on backgrounds and give you quite a lot to work with. And put a lot of detail into it. Even if you're in like in a park, they'll have like separate layers for like trees rustling and birds.
Oh, wow,
and, So there's loads that goes into it, and sometimes you can make things sound just really, really rich and full. I think the main layers that you like, room tone is just there to kind of help with the dialogue, to help that kind of bed in a little bit. Otherwise, the dialogue just sounds really isolated and you don't have any air, which is quite a strange you wouldn't notice it if you put air in, but you definitely notice if it wasn't there. It's one of those.
Okay. Is that just
And
like the sound
with
of wind
yeah.
interacting with things? Is that
Yeah, oh, not necessarily. It's just kind of like a neutral air.
okay?
It's hard to describe. Yeah, it's just sort of like a mic picking up air, and a very slight wind, or maybe if you're in a room, if you're just in like a hotel room or like a bedroom or something, it's just kind of maybe just kind of like
Okay, yeah,
low wind. Yeah, you don't hear it, but you do if it's not there.
yeah.
And then you get layers of like, depending on location. A lot of it does just depend on location, and people will just go shot by shot or scene by scene, and go, okay, like this location is in a restaurant, so we need cutlery, and we need maybe, and you kind of, the fun thing to do with it is invent a story in your head that's going on in the background that's not going on screen. So like,
Yeah.
for example, if you want something that's a very specific detail, you can have like, okay, now the bartender is going up to the cocktail shaker, and you hear the sound of a cocktail shaker going like that, and and ice, and okay, now he's pouring the drink, and now he's giving it to a customer, so you maybe put a bit of like a glass putting down, so you can invent a little narrative in your head, and put that into the background, and it just adds that extra layer of like, there's something going on over there that that you're not paying attention to, but you feel like you're in the place that's on screen.
No, I'm with you. So with if we take a look at like turbulence, for example, obviously I imagine a lot of the background for that would be, you've obviously got the flame of the hot air balloon, but then you've also got the wind. But then do you have like normal wind, but then the way the wind is interacting with the balloon itself as well?
Yeah.
What are sort of some of the layers that we might not have thought about?
Yeah, I mean, the burner was a big sound. That was put a lot of thought and time into that just to get it really right. And a lot of that was in the mix. And a big part of it was the basket as well. And the guys
like
that
creaking, almost. Like
and when we did the Foley for it, there was quite a lot of attention to just like having just a wild track of the basket just creaks various frequencies and various kind of impacts and things, just to have it there, and we just dotted it around wherever it felt right, because because the basket, and I think it's not wicker, I can't remember what it was made of. It was sort of like wooden material, so it was very, very creaky, and but obviously the basket on set, they tried their best to kind of keep it as free of that as possible, so it was really about like adding that element in. And we just had these loads of layers of like wood just kind of stressing and creaking, and you also have these like metal wires that go up the balloon, that are kind of clanging together sometimes. That, for me, that was the bit that really sold it, sort of the metallic clanging that you just hear above you and sort of around you. And a lot of the film, because it was shot with you in the balloon, in the mix, we were kind of really able to surround that stuff. You're able to really have the creaking and the balloon and everything in the room, so it felt like you were really in it, rather than it just being pushed to the screen. So so that was a really cool aspect of mixing that you don't often get to do on a film. So it sound wise, it became really interesting. And then the wind, like the balloon flapping, obviously, as you said, there's this really great feature of the film where the main character, I can't remember, Harry, I think his name was. Harry was the captain, Kelsey Grammer. He'd basically be the balloon captain, and he pulled this bit of wire, and it would open up a flap to either like make the balloon go up or make the balloon go down. And we added these like sort of low end rumbles just to make it feel like, oh, okay, the balloon's going up, 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 and then the balloon's coming down, had a bit more of a peaceful, sort of windy, top endy kind of sound to it. So it's just really exploring the physics of what's going on, and being like, okay, how do I attach a sound to the balloon going up? How do I attach the sound to the balloon going down? What do you hear? What do you not want to hear? When does it get distracting? Towards the end, there's like a really intimate moment between two characters and we were just like, well, let's just pull a lot of that background balloon stuff back.
Yeah.
Let's just really get in with what the characters are talking about. So you wouldn't notice it, but when they're having that conversation, we just start to strip all those layers out, like the clanging and everything. But then in the scenes where they're just having like normal chats, and it's just the movie's just kind of going along, that stuff's really there because you want to feel immersed in it.
Yeah.
So yeah.
No, it's amazing. Yeah, I love the idea of it. Drawing all those sounds out, so you build up that reality, but actually you are, as you're saying, like creating a subjective journey through the story, aligning us with the characters, and it's amazing what you can almost, I don't know, get away with. Maybe feels like the wrong word, but it's sort of like just trying to capture that sense of the audience will focus on what they're being directed to in a way. And hopefully that that's the sort of the heart of the story.
Yeah, totally. And you'd hope that they watch it in cinemas as well.
Yeah,
because that's ultimately when you put all that work into making something feel theatrical and cinematic, you're just like, please, I really hope you don't watch this on AirPods.
What about AirPods with spatial audio with that feature?
It certainly feels kind of spatial. I mean, it's not something I very much prefer. I think it was just like after working in a theatrical environment for so long, we're just like, well, that's the way you should watch movies.
Yeah.
But then the home entertainment side of things is its own beast as well. Like after we finish a theatrical mix, we take it into Twickenham Theatre 4, which is a sort of like small living room size room, and we essentially mix it down for a home theatre environment. You'd listen on a sound bar as a reference to see how people were hearing it, and that becomes its own thing because it's like, okay, well, we've got even less speakers to play with now. So when you're mixing for like a stereo, so how do we make sure that dialogue's coming across and the plot's coming across, and obviously in a home entertainment environment there are like loudness specifications that you have to adhere to.
Okay.
So it's its own challenge, and so some films, like when we do some of the Netflixy stuff, that's all near field, that's all home end, even though you will ultimately do a theatrical version of it. Really the mix that people were going to hear is the one that's playing off your TV. So that's the one to really make sure you're paying the most attention to.
And is that why sometimes when you're like watching a film on the TV or something and you're like, oh, the music's way too loud, I can't hear the dialogue, or like something's a bit off, is that usually because they haven't kind of done that process of checking all the different environments?
I think,
or it's just a bad mix.
Yeah. I don't know. I think like the concept of like a bad mix is a little bit subjective, because it's so it all depends on what the director's vision is and what the show, for a TV show, what the showrunner's vision is. I think sometimes when for example, like the music is too loud and you can't quite hear the dialogues, it's usually there's no common thing that kind of that leads to that. I think it's like when you're in a mixed environment and you're just constantly checking that sound bar, or you're constantly checking that stereo fold down. It's all about just making sure, can I hear the dialogue, and just cracking on with it. We've had it sometimes where and this is when I was a mix tech, so my job was to deliver all these audio files to various places. It's just so important about staying organized, and making sure everything is named correctly, because the last thing you want is to name something wrong, send that mix over, and then be like, oh god, they've put the theatrical mix and they've wrapped it into the home entertainment version, so it's going to sound completely wrong. And not that that's like ever necessarily happened, but that's just an example of what could happen.
That's why it's so important.
So the home mix is flatter, is that right? So it's less dynamic, or what are the other big differences?
Yeah, it's less dynamic. It's a little bit more, ever so slightly compressed, and it's normally limited to about well, it depends on who you're delivering to, but around -2, so it doesn't peak. Audio doesn't peak or anything past that point. And yeah, so it's just really about, and you mix for like home atmos and things, which if you're hearing it in a near field room that's got 10 speakers around you, there are very few audience members that are ever going to be hearing it with 10 speakers around them. So really it's all about that sound bar, that stereo. That's the thing that everyone's going to hear and references. Yeah.
You've mentioned a little bit about like the studio spaces at Twickenham, and I think it would be very interesting for our listeners to know kind of about Twickenham Studios, but also your kind of journey there and how you got into being a re-recording mixer and all the roles you do there. Yeah.
Of course, yeah. I mean, I've enjoyed all my time at Twickenham. It's been great. I started here as a runner in COVID.
Okay.
Like literally at the end of the very, very tail end of lockdown, Twickenham called me and said, "Oh, can you come in and be a runner? We've got this mix in." And I'd emailed them a year before that, just after I graduated, just to say, by the way, I want to get into sound. And so they were hiring a runner for the sound department, and they got me in, and they were like, "Yeah, we just need it for a job." And it turned out that the job that was in mixing at the time was Top Gun.
Wow.
And it was like, and that was like, oh my God. And that's like, one of the most iconic sound films of the last decade. So to be in that environment and to be speaking to the people that were working on that was like a real pleasure. And then, so from there, I worked my way up into junior mix tech, so assisting the sound department and various mixers that were in. And then I became a mix tech and worked on various projects myself, Mission Impossible and Gladiator.
Wow.
2, and that was again like a real like privilege to get your name on a couple of jobs like that, and with some of the biggest mixers in the world, and that it was sort of around that time where I started to think maybe this mixing thing is cool.
Because what did you study? Sorry,
I studied music tech.
Okay,
yeah. So that was, and that kind of fit, and I did a post-production module there, and that was like, okay, this is, I'd be quite keen to get in on this, and yeah, it's just been great ever since.
Like, what kind of things does a sound runner have to do?
Primarily get the teas and coffees right.
Yeah.
I think that role was, within the sound department, you do a run for each mix theatre where clients are in, and you just go around and make sure everyone's got their drinks and that the clients are looked after, because ultimately like that's what gets you the furthest. I think a lot of people that come up through the industry, there is this mistake of I'm working in the film industry, therefore I'm creative, therefore it's my vision, especially in sound. Ultimately you're always going to be in a client services role. You're always doing it for the person that's bringing you the work, or you're doing it for the person that's in front of you. And I think that kind of approach to things is at the very least what's helped me out over the last few years, of just like, it's not about being trying to get my vision across, because ultimately it's not my movie. So that's been a really helpful lesson that I've been told. I got told that when I was a runner, so that was I'm glad someone told me that.
And did you, when you were kind of coming up through the roles in Twickenham, did you have training at the studios, or was there, or did you kind of just learn on the job, or a bit of both?
It was a bit of both, actually. I think when I was a runner, every now and again I'd like, over a lunch or something, I'd go in and just shadow the other mixed techs and see what they were up to, or it's just about like asking people questions and just being around, really, because that's what people remember you for, the fact that you're there and you're keen and you're asking questions, and but not to a point where I think people sometimes the whole cold emailing thing, and it's so tough as well. You know, but it's breaking through that, breaking into the industry. That's the tough bit. But you know, I got very fortunate with how I got the job at Twickenham and how I managed to come up through the industry.
Yeah.
You know, not to say that I didn't work hard or anything for it, but it's just more, you know, it does take a little bit of good fortune for that stuff. But you know, just keep being keen, just keep being there, and ultimately it is inevitable that it will happen if you're asking the right questions and you know, you're coming across as someone who genuinely just wants to learn.
Yeah.
You know, I came out of uni and I was a little bit like arrogant when I first graduated. And I was just like, yeah, I've done it, I've completed it. You know, like now the job. Yeah. Yeah.
How should one practice, by the way? Like, obviously, obviously you want to have some confidence, you want to have some understanding. Like, if you're a student or you're not at university, is it short films? Do you need to make your own films and do your own sound on those films? What's the best way to sort of practice?
I think short films are a great way to break into it, especially if you are at uni and there are student films going. Then you know, that's a great way to just hop on and start getting an idea of what the process is.
Yeah.
And making mistakes. Just, you know, that's a great space to make those mistakes. And go, oh, okay, maybe I should mix like this next time, or maybe I should have my EQs set like this next time. It could, you know, it could be a whole number of things, but ultimately that's what will get you the kind of confidence to go, I've regularly been kind of doing work on stuff. Mm-hmm. I just want to now elevate that to, you know, making it my full-time job.
Do you have a technical checklist, I wonder, of like, these are the things in order to start mixing films? Like, do you need to know about EQ, compression? Like, what are sort of like the top things that people maybe can like research into to understand so that they can focus on maybe the creative side?
I think, yeah, it's an interesting question, because I weirdly think I don't think you can be creative without being technical in this role.
Yeah.
I think, you know, it's important to know how, you know, Pro Tools works. It's the industry standard software. It's important to really have a profound understanding of that, as well as maybe like a console like an Avid S6. So, you know, getting to grips with those things is the best thing you can do before getting into becoming a mixer full time. And the path to getting to being a mixer is being a mix tech anyway, for the most part. So you know, usually you'd have a knowledge of a quite vast knowledge of that when you get into being a mixer. But yeah, I think EQ, compression, reverbs, you know, multi-band compression. There's, you know, like dynamic shape, like transient shaping. And just experiment. Like, you know, that the tools are there. You know, they are. You know, you download Pro Tools, and most of the stuff that you need comes with it.
Yeah.
You know, practice on that. You know, learn how. Okay, what if I turn this style? What does it do to the sound? How is it affecting the signal? You know, really get to grips with how that thing works, and if you know, if it makes something sound the way you want it to sound, then you know you're kind of going into the right direction. And I think ultimately that's because when you get to a final mix stage, most of your work as a mixer is being done during the pre-mix. So, you know, the way you're setting your EQs, the way you're doing your reverb, getting everything to kind of balance out, you get a pre-mix stage where it's just you and the session in the mix theater. So you'll just kind of set everything up over the course of a few days and get the mix roughly shaped based on, you know, the rough dialogue guide and the rough music guide. And then the final mix is when the final music comes in, and it's just about making small tweaks that make that difference for, you know, for it to work as a story. Because usually there are two re-recording mixers. There's a dialogue and music mixer and a sound effects mixer. I mostly mix sound effects.
Yeah.
So.
I see. Yeah, as this when I've seen, you know, people work back to back almost. There's like two people on one mega computer. It feels very
Yeah,
Minority
yeah.
Report and really cool.
It's almost, it is a bit like being in a spaceship sometimes,
Yeah.
because, you know, and especially when there's like everyone's in the room, and, you know, the two directors are sitting behind you,
Yeah.
there are editors at either side of you, and you're just, and someone's hitting, all right, punch it, now you drive. And,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
like-
That reminds me as
It
well
does
of
feel a
what's
little bit-
that
yeah.
Del Toro Pacific Rim as well, where there's like the two pilots and they have to be in sync and stuff.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it is a bit like that, actually.
What are those? Obviously, you mentioned pre-mix. I wondered if you could just sort of break down sort of what the steps are. So you get all the sound in. What is pre-mix and how does it fit into the chronology of movie sound?
A premix is the stage between when the sound editors have finished cutting all the sound together, and the final mix, which is when everyone comes together, you know, dialogue and music and all the, you know, and the director and everything. So the premix stage is an opportunity to get the dialogue evenly leveled out, you know, get it into a shape and balance all the elements that are going on, you know, within the dialogue and crowd session. And sound effects premixing is a little bit similar to that. You know, you're shaping all your backgrounds and making sure they're sitting in the room how you want them to. You know, all the hard, like, spot effects, the featured effects that you really want to hear, you're spending a bit of time making sure, is there any, you know, is there a frequency that's a bit annoying? I'm just going to pull that out. Or does this thing need reverb? And, you know, putting it into a space, putting things into a space, like your Foley. So when we get delivered Foley, it's all kind of dry and clean. And, you know, it's about maybe pulling some of it back and helping it bed in with the dialogue and adding reverb to it. So it's like, oh, okay, we're in a train station, I'm going to add a train station reverb to it. So stuff like that. So yeah.
Oh, amazing. And then yeah, what are the following steps? Do you then do is ADR follow that step? Like, what sort of the ordering getting to that re-recording?
I mean, ADR can be a little bit random. I think most of the ADR is done before the premix. But if there are any additional lines that the director wants or anything like that, they can even say in the middle of the final mix, oh, we need to pick up this line, I'm just going to call the actor up, we'll get a session booked in, and then they'll record a line, they'll give it to the dialogue editor who'll kind of clean it up and make sure it's working, performance wise and everything, and you know, EQ wise and stuff, and they'll give it to the mixer, and then the mixer will help, you know, record that line in and into the final mix.
Amazing. No, super cool.
So,
and I wondered, sort of lastly, just before we come on to our sort of final couple of questions that we ask all our guests, I wondered, I know you spoke about sort of subjectivity and sort of following the emotion of the scene, but I didn't know if you had any sort of fun examples of almost using incorrect sound effects for cool result. Like so I work in horror a lot, so there's a lot of vegetables that get used in that for gore and violence. I didn't know if you had any fun sound effects that you used that you've used on different projects.
I'm trying to remember. I think the gore stuff's great. Like, that's always really, really fun. I think that some of the Foley guys on Turbulence recorded some great, like, gore blood splatter stuff.
Nice.
There's this bit where a lady kind of gets hit in the face and blood kind of goes everywhere. And it's just like they just got this, like, really thick liquidy sound. I don't know, I can't remember how they got it. But there was that, and then I'm trying to remember if there was anything particularly interesting. I know the cabbage comes quite a lot. Comes in very handy for sort of like people getting their heads chopped off and stuff. But celery is always a good one for bones. That's always a classic example. There was this, I think the first ever job where I'd been given the opportunity to edit some Foley on a Black Mirror episode, and it's the one where she turns into a werewolf on one of the newer seasons. And it was great. Like, they'd recorded all these, like, bone crackly, like, celery breaking and you know, various kind of, like, really hard material snapping. All that fun stuff normally happens in Foley. It's, you know, you always see them with, like, random objects and stuff, and you're just like, I bet they're recording something that's got nothing to do with what they're holding.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I love that. The questions that we ask all of our guests is sort of what were you up to maybe in your teenage years that turned out to be useful for what you do now? And what advice would you give to that teenage version of you?
That's a great question. My teenage self, what really helped me as a teenager was getting into music. I think that's ultimately the starting point of what got me into sound in the first place. And I think playing music and understanding music and everything was just like a really great way to, a foundation step into this direction. The advice I would probably give my teenage self, that is a really good question. I think I'd probably say, just to keep just be keen, always have that willingness to learn stuff.
Yeah.
Because you never know how far that's going to get you ultimately, and that doesn't just go for sound, that goes for kind of everything. Just always approach people with a mind that I want to learn something from you, and to just kind of let go of your own ego a little bit. I think that's usually the tough thing for, I feel, a lot of people to do, but that's ultimately what gets you further along. I'm still at a relatively young point in this industry, so and even to get to this point, it took quite a lot of just going I'm just gonna learn stuff from you and hope something cool comes out of it. And a lot of the time it does, because people acknowledge that you're not you're not there to step on toes. You're there to actually learn the way this industry has been and the way that this industry is moving.
100%. I love that. Manav, thank you so much. It's been really, really amazing.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. It's been great fun.
I think sound is such a, I think I opened with saying that, but it's such a powerful tool. So I just want to say it again. It's
really,
and I think it can be perceived as quite technical, but I think the reality is I think it's I think you can Google all these things. If you don't know what EQ is, Google EQ. If you don't know what compressor is, Google compressor. And eventually you run out of things to Google because you actually understand it all. And then it's just about utilizing all those different tools and stuff,
And it's just another way to serve the story. It's another part of the story. And it's really interesting when you get into all those nooks and crannies of how this sound can impact the story, because it does have such a huge impact.
Yeah, for sure. And I think sometimes what we see from young filmmakers every now and then is an over desire to, or a very creative and passionate desire to utilize as many techniques and tools as possible in every given moment, to almost showcase understanding of different techniques. And sometimes the best thing to do is just strip it back and get out of your own way. And if you're unsure on sort of how to bring a scene to life in sound, just don't overthink it and do what you expect to hear, I guess. And you don't need to overwhelm the audience,
It's also all about practice and experimentation. If you have a software like Final Cut or Premiere Pro or whatever other software you're using, you can spend time looking at their sound effects and looking at the sound layers and if you do this, how does it sound different, and just playing around with that. There is freedom to do that.
100%. I think Final Cut's got a whole sound library built in, which is amazing. And you don't necessarily have to start with Avid. You can Avid Pro Tools, which is the software he was talking about. You can just start, if you're editing your own films as well, Premiere Pro and Final Cut, and have all got good sound tools built in. And DaVinci, I love DaVinci. That's got a Fairlight tab, it's called, where you can just go in and it's essentially a fully fledged sound mixing software built into it. So you don't have to.
And there's so many tutorials online as well, and
exactly, the techniques translate and stuff. But and really, I think one thing that's good to do is to start when you watch a film and you really like a scene, and maybe you really like how a scene sounds, break it down in your head, pause it, write a list. What are the things you're hearing and how is it playing with it?
one of my favorite things is to think about what's happening on sort of the high, medium and low frequencies. So high frequency being like, you know, the higher pitch sounds, and the low frequencies being like the sort of the bass rumble and stuff. Because a lot of exciting, like punchy sound effects are utilizing both. Like gunshots will have like the crack of the gunshot at the top, but then the at the bottom, and it's sort of those two sound effects, or those two extremities within the frequencies, that really sort of give it punch and I don't know, shock factor. And guns, by the way, sounds so different in every film. Like each film has a different interpretation of how guns sounds.
Have a watch of your favourite films and listen to them, really listen to them.
Exactly. Well, Ellen, thank you for joining me. This has been really wonderful, as always, and we'll see you guys in a future episode.
And thanks to Manav again as well.
Absolutely. Thank you, Manav, and we'll speak to you soon. Bye-bye.